Whether you're talking to parents or guarantors, residents, talking to peers, talking to supervisors, be present in the moment and don't squander those opportunities. Take chances. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I think being comfortably uncomfortable is something that I have preached for a long time.
Reputation is everything. We've all heard it and we all believe it. Be it building and monitoring your online reputation or measuring your resident satisfaction in real time, we all know how important that is. The truth is, we spend too much time asking for reviews, responding to reviews, surveying our residents, and analyzing those surveys. This is all important, but there needs to be an easier way to manage it all. And in student housing, sometimes there just needs to be an automatic way of managing it, like during turn or for move-in day. Well, there is one platform out there that does just that. It's called Opinion. Opinion integrates with your property management software to automatically ask residents for reviews so you can get real-time feedback. It also works to generate more positive online reviews and ratings completely in the background without you ever having to push out an email or a text message. You can build surveys that are automatically sent out based on certain events within a tenant's lease cycle or an ad hoc community-wide survey. And it's working behind the scenes to analyze all of that feedback and present it to you in a way that you can quickly understand your property's resident satisfaction level and get insight into your team's performance. Listen, there are a lot of platforms and applications that can help you monitor and respond to your online reputation. Some will even help you generate more reviews, but Opinion allows you to do it hands-free and brings you the feedback you need in order to take meaningful action. So let Opinion do the heavy lifting and give your team more time to focus on your tenants. For more information, click on the link in the show notes or go to Opinion, which is spelled with 3 I's, opinion.com/SHI. Again, that's opinion.com/SHI. Go there today and get a special promotion for our audience members. Hello and welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. I'm also the CEO and founder of Student Housing Insight. Yes, Student Housing Insight is not only a podcast, but we're a platform for off-campus student housing professionals to connect, network, and learn. You can find out more at studenthousinginsight.com. Well, I am so glad that you are tuning in for this episode. About 2 years ago, actually it was right at 2 years ago, I started doing these profile episodes where I'm interviewing a student housing veteran and just talking about their career journey and advice that they've got for folks that are trying to determine if this is an industry they want to stay in or not. I've been in this industry going on 28 years now. And so some of those veterans, I feel like I know really well, but then I do one of these profile episodes with them. And I tell you, I found out so many interesting things that I had no clue about. And I'm hearing the same thing from our audience. So, please, I love those comments. Love to hear what you guys get out of these different episodes that we're doing. But in this episode, I'm interviewing Article Student Living COO, Matt Maxa. Now, you may hear Article Student Living and say, who's that? Well, you've been under a rock since probably about October or so, but Matt will get into it. But essentially, it's the team that was formerly at CA Student Living, and one of the equity groups bought out the other partners and they've created Article. So he'll explain more about that. Now, if you've never met Matt, you'll never forget him once you do. He's got one of probably the best beards in this industry. I think that's an official title that he holds. But he's got a smile and a personality that's it's so inviting and easygoing. I've never worked with Matt directly, but I know a lot of folks who have, and they all talk just highly about him. But I've got a feeling if you stepped on his shoes, he might start a fight with you. We get a little into his shoe fetish as well. But you know what? With that being said, let's get to the interview with Matt Maxa at Article Student Living. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it. Morning.
Well, hey, we've got a lot to go over. Exciting things going on with yourself and Article. But before we even go down that road, you are known as student housing's best beard.
Oh,
in the industry.
That's it. That's it.
Anytime I bring up Matt Max's name, someone ends up saying he has got just the best beard in the industry.
There are worse things to be known for, so I'm good with that. I got a good barber here in Chicago.
Now, you've got one of those beards, it looks like you were probably born with it, but that doesn't happen. So, is this something you've been carrying since high school or how did you?
I probably had uncomfortable long sideburns and a soul patch in high school for a long time because I could grow it. And then, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago, started growing a longer beard, but it's kind of fluctuated. But I don't think I've seen my face in a very long time. Frankly, it's just this.
For those that don't know Matt, haven't seen his picture on LinkedIn, aren't seeing this on video, or you're just listening to this on audio, it's got that kind of Duck Dynasty length to it, but it's got the grooming of like a Tom Selleck mustache. It's really impressive, Matt.
I appreciate that.
Well, hey, a couple things I think before we, really getting into your origin story and everything. I think the biggest news going on with you is not you personally, but from a professional standpoint is what's happened with Article. You want to give just a quick update on that?
Yeah, sure. So in August of last year, we basically, Quadreal is the equity behind Article, and they were a partial owner in the company when we were at CA Student Living. And in August, they basically saw the value and the viability of our organization and ended up actually purchasing the company outright. And I think they also saw just in general the resiliency in student housing in the U.S. Right? I think collectively they're a Canadian company, but U.S. student housing has been through a lot over the years. I've been in it for 20 plus years, and I've seen everything from the 2008 worries to the pandemic here of the last few years that we're kind of coming out of now. So they saw a lot of value in what we do and our people here and our expertise and what we have going on, and ended up, again, purchasing the company. And then we, to create our own identity, ended up rebranding. We created Article just a few months ago, and we're full steam ahead. So our team's super excited. Same leadership team that we had from the management side as well as investments and development. They're still here. So we're just excited to be going into 2024.
Well, that's fantastic. I know a lot of news has been coming out about it. Quadreal is based in Toronto, correct?
Vancouver, actually.
Vancouver. Okay. Mm-hmm. So West Coast. Great. Well, hey, Matt Maxa is a name that I've known for a while in this industry, but I've been in this industry for a while. For those that may be a little bit new to it and don't know you personally, I kind of really wanted to jump into that. Let's just start with your origin story. Where did you grow up? How did that intersect with student housing?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, born and raised. My parents are from the Midwest. Mom's from Ohio, dad's from Chicago. So kind of fitting that I ended up in Chicago at the end of the day. I love this city, so it all worked out. Went to school at UCF in Orlando. Go Knights. Ended up going for finance undergrad and then went to grad school for an MBA. While I was there, I went to college at 17, so I couldn't actually sign my first lease without my dad. So it was kind of funny. Had to co-sign that. And back then you got discounts for writing your check in full at the beginning of the year, which is kind of funny. I remember saving up money all summer long to do that. We don't do that anymore. So it's an unfortunate part of the industry, but it's a thing. When I got to college, I was there for a year working a regular job, actually at a tuxedo store, oddly enough, doing some sales and different things for weddings and whatnot. And a new property was opening up called Jefferson Lofts. Yeah. It was a townhouse style product in Orlando, kind of the first of its kind, especially really in student housing for a long time. We hadn't seen that. And some friends wanted to go there. I grew up from, I would say, very humble beginnings. I didn't have a lot of money. I worked full time, like since I was 13 years old, like working then and going to college full time, doing all these different odd jobs, working construction and doing different things. So I looked at that. Some friends wanted to sign there, and I just legitimately couldn't afford to be there. And then I really found out about student housing in that moment. I understood that if you worked there for 20, 25 hours a week, you got your rent for free. And that's really how I started. I was a community assistant over 20 years ago in Orlando. Got the call, started with JPI, went in EDR, or Allen O'Hara, then EDR after that. But they were all the same kind of organization. And really, I was a CA for 4 months. From there, went into a full-time leasing role. It kind of popped up because somebody had left. And I remember that conversation pretty distinctly because people in the office were pretty nervous. They were like, anybody here looking to, get into leasing before we go out and try to hire somebody? And I said, how hard could this be? Like, I chose to live here. This is exciting. This is an easy job. I can go sell this to somebody else. And that's really how I got into leasing. I started doing that full time. Went into, 4 months as a CA, went into leasing. From there, what we call a resident services manager, which now can be probably called an assistant manager or a bookkeeper. Went into leasing manager, property manager, senior manager, regional manager, SVP, EVP, COO. So it's just been quite the journey for me. I think along the way, for me, a pretty linear path, frankly. I was going, kind of where I wanted to go in the space. But I will say that when I first started, nobody, including myself, in student housing thinks they're going to be in student housing 20 years later. I was doing that as a means to an end in college and ended up kind of sucking me in, and it worked out.
So let's talk about that UCF experience, because I've got some ties back to that. And there are a ton of folks that have come out of UCF that are in this industry. Larry Greenberg at ACC is one that comes to mind real quick. So there was the first property I started on was University Club at UNC Charlotte, and they had a sister property, University Club at UCF, which was a townhome design, which I think predates the Jefferson property, doesn't it?
It did, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, just the explosion that you've seen, on that campus and what's happened off campus, with all the building and everything. Kind of give me some of your thoughts on, do you think that's going to continue? You think they've kind of reached their max, or?
I don't think so. When I started there in 2002, the school itself is obviously massive. It's the second largest school in the country, and it's been growing like a weed since then. And they also have a lot of land mass. So the idea that it can continue to expand is a real possibility, and it's done that over the years. And I think that it would have probably grown a little bit faster even in the 2000s and 2010s, but slowed a little bit just due to some state funding and different things. But overall, it's just been a really, really cool growth pattern. And I think when I started going to school there, our football team actually played at the Citrus Bowl. We didn't even have a stadium on campus. So Since then, a lot of changes there, which also, as you know, in this industry, I think sports also drives a lot of interest in universities. So having a sports team that is on the upward track, joining the Big 12, growing again, I think it's helpful. And I think one of the unique things about the UCF and Orlando market in general is, unlike some more urban assets or urban type markets, the non-pedestrian market there and the pedestrian market, there's not a lot of them, but the pedestrian market there are very similar in rent profiles and style. Everybody drives in Florida. There's a lot of parking at UCF. So people tend to not really care if they're a quarter mile away or if they're a mile and a half away, which is a rarity in this space.
Yeah. Any ideas whatever happened with that property, the University Club property?
I know it got rebranded. I just don't know the name of it anymore. It's been a long time. I go back for all the football games.
4 or 5 times by now, but
yeah,
it was because they had the same floor plan that we had in Charlotte, which was really unique because you had a master, if that's what you want to call it, downstairs, and then three bedrooms upstairs, as well as a laundry room. And that was something in student housing. Everybody was doing the flats, with the 4-bedroom, 4-bath, 2 bedrooms off each side kind of thing. That was just kind of the standard. And so when that townhome design came out, everybody was jumping to it. Kind of a lot like what happened with the cottages, several years later. So
yeah, that was the interesting part about like Jefferson Lofts, and then called the Lofts afterwards. But why that was interesting is that the 4-bedroom, 2-bath and the 4-bedroom, 4-bath both had like an actual loft upstairs. So when you toured, I remember touring folks and being, this is the way you can create your own space and make it your own. And it was a cool selling point in that market at the time. You're right. It was all, for the most part, flats, apartments, or, if it wasn't flats, there may have been some townhouses in the conventional market, but not in the student space. Again, the University Club being one of them.
So everything from, I guess, Jefferson Commons to EDR was basically acquisitions, right? Or did you switch companies?
Oh, at the time, I think Jefferson Lofts was JPI.
JPI is what I'm into.
JPI was what it was at Jefferson Lofts. And then Allen O'Hara acquired that, and when they went public in 2008, rebranded or just differently branded as EDR. And when they went to the public market and became that publicly traded REIT, a little larger space.
Gotcha. And then from there to CA Ventures and now to Article, or did I miss something in between?
No, I was with the JPI days. I kind of count as my EDR. Allen O'Hara all was one thing. I was there for a little over 13 years, and then I came to CA Student Living in 2016, and then I was there until again the rebrand and the kind of the new company formation of Article here in the past 6-7 months.
Gotcha. Cool. So any shout outs to any of the folks that kind of mentored you through the way?
Absolutely. I was very blessed in my career. Truly. I worked with some of the finest in the industry. A lot are still here. One of my first managers, Jan Florsheim, I talked to her honestly every few weeks. Her husband and we talk about UCF football and just life in general. I was fortunate enough to work with Matt Fulton and Chris Richards and Beth Pinder at EDR. I think Chris, her and I are very close, and it's funny. She now works in Chicago as well. At times she's up here. I got to spend some time with her just about a month ago, and I recognized an early part in my career. I wanted to emulate, a lot of what she was doing in my, in her career, in my career. So it was a big deal for me, and I was super fortunate to have that mentorship and that leadership in my career. And then most recently, I would say, with CA Student Living, Steve Boyack, who now works in the multi space again as opposed to student, but I learned a lot from him from the strategy component of the business, right? I'm an operator by heart, that's where I came from by trade. And I think, getting into that next level of my career was a strategy focus. So I've been, again, just ultra blessed to have those people in my life. And it's been very, very helpful.
Yeah. Chris is fantastic. We had her.
Yeah.
We did a profile on her last year. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of things I thought I knew about Chris, but there were a lot of things that I learned new from that interview. It was fantastic. So.
Her affinity for Diet Coke, everybody knows that one.
I don't know how anybody gets through a day without it. So.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about, before we start talking about the future, but kind of your team now. I mean, I know some of the folks that you've got around you. I've worked with some of them. It's a fantastic team, but, would love to kind of hear a little bit about what you guys are putting together and some of the key folks that are making Article what it is today.
Like much of student housing, right? Over the years, I think people have worked at a few main companies and then branched out over time, and we've been able to assemble some of the best and brightest in the space, and we're very fortunate. I mean, our leadership team has been doing student housing for a very long time. Scott Manning, our SVP of operations, has been in it 20 years, similar to me. Brenna Tucson, who is on our SVP of sales and training. She's been doing it for 17 years, I believe. Erica White, close to that same number. She's an absolute boss in the space. She is our SVP of technology and strategic services, and she's just phenomenal. She gets a lot of involvement in the industry outside of just her skill sets, right? Everybody knows her, which I'm, again, we're blessed to have her, but to have her in the space advocating on our behalf and being an ambassador for our brand and for the industry as a whole and for W Collective is a big deal. Jacqueline Arnest, who is our SVP of communications and marketing, been here for about 2 years now, been in the space for a long time, been in the NAA board for quite some time. So in the industry as a whole, people know who she is. And then most recently, we promoted Rachel Goldstein into our RVP of operations, and she's kind of slotting under Scott. So she's been with our company for, I think, 8 years now, internally, working the way up to the ranks. But collectively, all these folks worked on site. Which is pretty much a good story in student housing. A lot of people came up that same exact career path. And outside of that, of the operations side of the business, from an investment lending standpoint, we have some really talented folks. Emily and Chang on the investment and lending front through RN, and Brian Berder on the construction and development front. So really, really well-rounded team. And then Thierry Cable is our current president as well. And he's been with Quadrio prior to this and through the transition and overseeing our company, and really just done yeoman's work in the last seven months or so to get us to this point. And we're excited.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about, kind of the future. What are some of the biggest challenges facing the industry that you see coming down the pipeline?
I'm not sure they're coming down the pipeline. I think they're here. I think, there's two parts to that, right? You have the development or the interest rate front, which is affecting development and acquisitions. I mean, the interest rates being high, it's just making deals harder to pencil, right? Whether you're building from the ground up or trying to acquire things, or if you got refinancing coming up, it's just a difficult landscape to be in, and it has been for quite some time. I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. We're all tuned into a lot of the different various podcasts, both from you guys and student housing business and different avenues from the conferences and whatnot. And you hear folks speak about where we're headed. So I do think there's a turnaround. Development pipeline is picking back up, which is great. But acquisitions too. I think that it's just been, there's some opportunistic things out there, but they're difficult to make pencil as easy maybe as they were 10 years ago. And I think on the operations front, it's no secret expenses are increasing, whether that's in insurance or labor costs, material costs, utility costs. They've all been going up. So there's this, need from the operators in the space to get creative. Like, what are you doing to combat that? Are we, some of the people in the space are doing some things, or, centralization is a big buzzword in the space. I'm not sure I fully agree with all of it, but I will say there's items that can complement what we do in order to create some synergies across the board, whether that's double or tripling down in markets, whether that is creating some, vendor relationships that allow us to do some things more efficiently. We just got to get creative and continue to do that. The fortunate part of all of that in the last couple of years, though, is we've seen record-breaking rent growth to combat that, right? So when I was starting in the space, you as well, you probably were, with the standard was 2 to 3, maybe 4% on a really good year. To see 6, 7, 8% over the last couple of years has been very exciting, but it's pushing that. Yeah, exactly. Some markets are higher than others, but as a portfolio, to see those numbers, it is really incredible. So we're fortunate to be able to combat those issues over time. And I'm hoping that the light in the tunnel here in the next few months to a year will kind of put or reset some of our metrics in student housing and go back to kind of pre-pandemic development and acquisition pipelines.
Yeah, you mentioned doubling and tripling down in some markets, and I've seen you guys do that. I guess Reno comes to mind. I've seen it. Yeah, I mean, you guys have done that.
Quadrupled down in Minneapolis. So,
I want to park it there for just a minute on the operations side. What's kind of been the approach? I mean, because I think I have seen it where maybe the second or third property might be a little bit smaller, but typically where I've seen you guys put 2 or 3 properties in, 2 properties would probably be over 500 beds, right? And so that's going to require typically a full staff. What's kind of your thought after experiencing that? Do you treat everything completely separate, not try to consolidate on staff, or does each property really deserve its own staff? Outside of, obviously, a new lease up is,
sure,
a little bit different. But once it's stabilized, are there any, is there any way to save money on staffing there?
Yeah, there's certainly efficiency to be had. I mean, I think on the maintenance supervisor front and the property manager front, there are definitely opportunities there. I think that if you're in a market, like for instance, Minneapolis is a great example where you're actually kind of operating in 2 sub-markets, you've got to be cognizant of that. So if you're operating in the Dinkytown market and Prospect Park, your demographics are different, your target market is different. So you kind of have to have 2 separate staffs there. You can't just have one person overseeing a lot of that. But I will say that, as we just, built the opposite. Instead of building a smaller property, built a 1,000-bed property that just opened. And I will say that, as we get down this path after this first year, if opportunities present themselves for synergies across different platforms, we'll do that. I know in Champaign, we have 2 properties, Reno, 2 properties, and we have seen some senior manager type roles over time where that works. A lot are standalone for a number of reasons. One, if they're a larger property, there's really not a ton of efficiency you can gain other than, again, maintenance supervisor or property manager. But I'd also say that depending on what your company is doing, if you are just an operator or if you're a manager, for instance, it may be an equity partner that would like to have their own staff. They don't want commingled to staffs or oversight, which is very fair. That's happened in the past with us and our third-party deals. But typically speaking, if we're able to have somebody overseeing a couple assets, we try to do that, again, because of some of the expense increases over the last few years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've experienced a lot of new development. And obviously, at the time that you were with EDR, I know there were a lot of acquisitions that were going on. What's your preference? You prefer to do new development or a new acquisition?
No preference to me, honestly. I think growth is the key, right? I think that any time that as an organization we're growing, that means opportunities for people. And as someone who came up through the ranks of student housing, opportunities are very exciting and they keep people motivated. So I love both sides of that. I would say that acquisitions are right now. Developments take a lot of time and work in the front end, and there's a lot of pre-work involved in that. And it's the waiting, right, for the ribbon to be cut. But Acquisitions are exciting because they're now. I mean, everything from it's a very quick timeline, but you've got to turn around. But you go in and take over a property and get to know their team, and if you can update things, if it's warranted, we do that. No different than anybody else. But I think both have their own place in my heart, because again, growth is the key metric there.
Yeah. So most of the folks that are listening to this podcast are site level managers, and a lot of them, come to me, and when I see them at conference, or if I'm out doing some consulting work and shopping properties, and someone recognizes the name or whatever, and they'll start asking me questions about it's typically along the lines of, hey, I've been here since I was a CA, I've been a property manager for a year. This isn't what I went to school for, but I think this is something I really enjoy doing. What kind of advice do you have for me when it comes to planning out a career in this industry? How would you answer that question?
A lot of ways. I can tell you, I've had that question personally as well from our team members and others in the industry. And I would say the first, to address one of the pieces in that, is like about the background, right? I don't think that many folks go to college, or even if they don't go to college, but have that mindset of, I would love to go into student housing. I think it's something that for me, it fell into my lap as an opportunity, and it provided me some advancement along the way, and I stayed with it. But I don't think your background necessarily matters. Like, I think that's one of the coolest things that I tell our leasing managers and our property managers at our conferences, is the breadth of knowledge and the breadth of background amongst our employees is impressive, to say the least. You could have sociology, you could have an engineering degree. I did finance, you could be in marketing, and all of those translate, because if you're good at customer service and you're good at taking care of people, both employees as well as residents, and you can have a little bit of financial acumen at some point in your career, you can be in this space for a very long time. And the last thing I would say on that particular front is that my journey happened to be very linear. I went in the path that I thought was going to happen once I got down that road. Like, I went in this way in terms of different levels of my career because it made sense. But I have told a lot of our folks that within an organization, I was an operator, but there are, just like any other business, right? There are so many pieces of the space that are in the industry that aren't operations. They could be anything from accounting, development, acquisitions, lending, investment. So if somebody is studying one of those things, but happens to work at a property, their perspective going into a company like Article is invaluable, right? Because now they know how the property operations work, and they get to work in a different part of our business. And it really, to me, gives them a leg up on somebody coming from the outside or in that particular world or competency. So I do love that. People at the property, though, it's funny. I just actually went through something similar to this internally, about like a spotlight on my career to kind of showcase what our people are doing. Mm-hmm. And I tried to distill it down to a few things. One, I said, be present in the moment. Whether you're talking to parents or guarantors, residents, talking to peers, talking to supervisors, be present in the moment and don't squander those opportunities. I also said on there that take chances. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I think being comfortably uncomfortable is something that I have preached for a long time. My first move to be a property manager was to Statesboro, Georgia. I didn't know anybody. I was with EDR. I was in Orlando, Florida. I interviewed with our internal company on a Friday, and 7 days later packed my things and moved. So that was a big change for me. But being uncomfortable in that moment kind of made me who I am in my career. And it's okay to take those chances, especially when you're young in your career, to do that. And you can, really find yourself as both professional and personally. And then I think lastly on that is focus on people, and the performance will follow. I always see everything in the industry, and me included when I was younger too, that performance matters, right? You're so focused on the numbers, rate growth, occupancy, NOI, pick a metric. We're so focused on that. But I think as I got farther along in my career, that when you turn around and focus on the people at your properties, the people in your organization, the performance follows. They want to run through a wall for you. They want to do well for you. They want to be that successful individual at their communities or at their position at the home office. And that to me was a big eye opener in the last 3 to 5 years. The last thing I'd say is I mentioned some mentors earlier, and to quote Ted Lasso, probably be curious, right? When I was at a lot of my conferences growing up as a leasing manager, property manager, regional manager, I took every opportunity to talk to these mentors, talk to folks I didn't know, and really just walk up to them and say, like, how are you? What do you do here? There's no level of hierarchy, in my opinion, that applies to those situations, because I was always someone who was pretty bold in asking those questions. I remember talking to Chris and Matt when I was Matt Fulton's a leasing manager, Chris Richards, leasing manager, seeing him at sites, talking to our investment partners and folks that I just wanted to know more. I wanted to be kind of crave some knowledge. And I will tell you that when people ask me those things now, I am so excited and happy to tell them a story or answer their questions, because it takes me back, right? It keeps me fresh. It keeps me in that mindset of what they do with the properties and what we do in different places that I've been in my career and what's changed. So I just say be curious and ask those questions to those people and really get involved.
So I want to try something out. You mentioned Statesboro, and I always tell everybody, if you're in this industry for more than 2 years, there's basically 2 degrees of separation between you and somebody else, specifically with a property. So one of the last companies I was with, we acquired from Kane Anderson a property that Campus Apartments was managing. Kane Anderson had purchased it from EDR, and it was part of the old Place Properties portfolio. So at the time, it was probably Statesboro Place.
It was the Point at Southern.
Point at Southern, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. We purchased that and managed it. There were a lot of things as we acquired it that, there had to be some CapEx put into it, but that was a fantastic property. Love managing that property.
My first manager job was at the Point at Southern, and from there I went over to the Avenue at Southern, in the same market. EDR owned both at that time, and I managed one for about a little over a year, then managed the other for a little over a year before moving to Charlottesville. So I remember those properties very well. Statesboro, you're right. It's almost like a proving ground in student housing at some point in the Southeast to get you somewhere else in your career.
Yeah, like I said, there's typically only. You have a conversation with somebody in student housing and you'll figure it out really quick that you either worked in the same market at the same time or you worked on the same property, within 4 or 5 years of each other. It's so weird like that. But hey, let's talk a little bit about, what's happening over the next, we're at the beginning of the month. We're talking out January 25th. Sorry, not at the beginning of the month. We're here at the beginning of 2024, and it's the 25th of January when we're recording this. So thinking about, the next 12 months out, anything special for yourself or article that you guys are focused on?
Sure. I think I mentioned earlier about the development pipeline. We've got a few in the docket right now that are delivered this year, one in Gainesville, one at Yale. And then going forward, I think, growth is the key here. I mentioned it earlier a little bit, but, we're focused on growth in different avenues. With the development pipeline being a little slower in the industry, it's bouncing back from pre-pandemic levels, but it is getting there. We're on that same kind of trajectory where we're ramping back up. But I think in the near term, acquisitions will be our main focus in the next 12 months, looking all over the country and trying to make those things pencil. So we've got a team set aside to do that, and we're ready to take on more responsibility and kind of grow the portfolio. But we'll do it strategically. We're not going to just grow to grow. We're going to be in the space looking for the right deals. And again, like you talked about a minute ago with that, when I said, doubling, tripling down, if we already have opportunities or properties in markets, we can have opportunities to add to that portfolio because of our market knowledge and our current, travel schedule and all of that. Makes a ton of sense. And there's some synergies there, both the home office and in the market itself. So that's kind of our focus over the next 12 months. And I'd say, just in general, getting the first year under our belt as Article Student Living, from a culture standpoint, from our employee standpoint, we're all very pumped to start that off.
Awesome. So a little birdie told me that you're a big shoe guy, and I hear that there's actually an Article shoe that has been manufactured.
There is. So, yes, I do have way too many shoes. It's a problem for sure. There's worse vices in this world, but I do have a lot of shoes. And my team, knowing that about me, actually got me a pair of custom Dunks for Christmas. And in turn, I was like, I don't want to be that guy, but these are really cool shoes, so you should all have them. So I actually went and created them and bought them all a pair as well. So the next conference that we're at, I hope you get to see them.
Are you wearing them today? You got to show them.
I am wearing them right now. Should I show them? Let me see if I can get one out. Let me get one off. I'll show you the shoe. It's pretty cool. It's our colors for our Dunk. So it's pretty dope looking shoe. And then I don't know if you can see on here, but on the tag here, it says Article on
awesome.
On the tongue. We did a pretty bang up job on that. I'm really excited about it. The team is pumped, and it's, again, I think just getting some new swag. I mean, obviously I'm wearing some today for the podcast, but overall we're pumped as a team. I've said this for years. In this space, we're all very fortunate because I've got a lot of friends in here and I love working with these people. and it makes my life and my job a lot easier.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, hey, I think that's a great point to end on. And Matt, thanks so much for taking time out to share your story. And we'll definitely put your LinkedIn information in the show notes so folks can reach out to you and connect with you and make it a great year, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. A really great start to the morning. So thank you again. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, take care, Matt.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Well, again, big thanks to Matt for sharing his background and his career journey. I'm looking forward to seeing what both him and the team at Article accomplish this year. It's a fantastic team over there. If you've never met with them, connect with them on LinkedIn, because folks like Erica and Brenna and Jordan, they've just been fantastic to work with on Shop Talk and a lot of the other things that we do. They care so much about the other folks in this industry and helping them out as well. So make sure you connect with them on LinkedIn. Well, hey, a couple of quick updates before we go. Getting back to Shop Talk, which is, if you haven't heard about it, it's the industry's monthly webinar that we host. The next one is on February 13th, and that's going to be on a Tuesday. We typically try to do those on a Thursday, but for February, it's going to be on Tuesday, February 13th. And we've got a panel of 3 marketing agencies that are outlining what student housing operators need to be focused on with their social media strategy in 2024. The panelists for that will include Matt Pavlik from Grow Marketing, Alex Abernathy from Poetic, and Sam Wynn from Agency 53. So that's going to be a big lineup for that. You can register for that by going to shoptalk.info. And of course, we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you again for listening to this episode. And if I brought you any value, please share this with your colleagues. I can't tell you how much that means to me. I also want to thank Opinion for being the sponsor of this episode. If you're not currently utilizing any kind of platform or process to measure your resident satisfaction and to generate positive reviews, or maybe you are using something and it requires your staff members to ask for positive reviews from the residents, which means you're probably losing out on 90% of the positive reviews you could be getting, then get in touch with Opinion. They've got a special discount for the listeners of this podcast. We'll provide the link in the show notes, but it is Opinion, and that's spelled with 3 I's. So OPINION.com/SHI. And again, we'll put that in the show notes. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.